Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
As if it's not enough to be the best events guy in the business, Clinton Eastmith is also a great singer. Please join me in giving him another round of applause. As you're finding your seats, we will commence the program immediately. I know that you've enjoyed this conference, and I'll await your attention so we can get started. Thank you. So today is the exclamation point on what has been already 2 full days of an outstanding conversation. Yesterday you got the headmaster eyes. Friday you might get more than that. Remember, I wear boots. Thank you. Thank you very much. So it has been an outstanding conference because of your attendance and participation. What I want to do as we begin this breakfast, and before introducing or recognizing some elected officials a little bit later in the program, is take a moment and ask all of my Texas Public Policy Foundation colleagues to stand, because I can tell you on behalf of all of our supporters and friends and people who are getting to know us, all of you who make our work possible in the trenches deserve a round of applause. Thank you. You know that I have the best job in the world because every day I get to work with them, and I really do mean that. And I think one of the many great things about TPPF is not just that we have cheerful warriors and not just that they're smart, but that you as friends, whether you're an older friend of TPPF or you're just getting to know us, can spend time with these folks. And I think ultimately that's the secret to a healthy civil society, as we have talked about often this week, spending time with one another and having really sincere friendships. I also want to take a moment to recognize and thank today's breakfast sponsor, Alkermes, as well as the rest of our sponsors who've made this event possible. Thank you very much for your generosity. We are in for a fantastic day, starting with our breakfast speaker, who will be introduced in a little while, as well as our closing lunch, and you know that will involve both of our U.S. senators. It's a pleasure to kick this off by inviting our friend and wonderful representative in the Texas House, Matt Krause, to the stage. Representative Krause just began his 4th term in the Texas State Legislature. He represents District 93 in Tarrant County, and his district includes parts of Fort Worth and Arlington. If you've gotten to know Representative Krause, and if you haven't, you should, one of his trademarks, in addition to his faith and focus on his family, is his cheerfulness. And you know that if we're going to do a good job of being Reagan conservatives and fulfilling our Texas spirit of optimism, that's how we should conduct ourselves. So it is a great pleasure to welcome Matt Krause to the stage. Here you go.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Good morning. How are y'all doing? Good. House District 93 includes Fort Worth and Arlington, but it also is home to AT&T Stadium and the recently victorious Dallas Cowboys. So really excited about that. And if they win and the Eagles win, we'll come back to House District 93 in 2 weeks for an NFC Championship game, which brings in tens of thousands more people, which gives us a lot more sales tax revenue, which should allow us to decrease our property taxes. So hopefully we can figure out a way to do that. But let's start off the morning right and go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I just thank you for some of the incredible men and women I see in this room today who have done incredible things for Texas. I think of Ernie Angelo and all the work that he's put in for decades to make Texas the bastion of freedom and liberty that it is. I think about guys like Doug Deason, who I saw, who have worked so hard to bring people second chances and redemption through the criminal justice system. We just thank you for these men and women who selflessly give of themselves to make Texas a better place. And we know that your word says, to whom much is given, much is required. And I can't think of any state or country you've given more to than Texas and the United States. So we know that you're going to require much of us, but I think we are up to that task. And with the brilliance of the individuals in this room, combined with the dedication and hard work of the officials in Austin and around the state, I know that we can continue to keep Texas that light, that city shining on a hill for others to come. And we pray that as they come, they have the wisdom to know that there's a reason they're leaving their state and coming to ours. And we pray that they would understand that that's because we don't shy away from but embrace the Judeo-Christian values that our country and our state were built upon. And we know that your word says where there is no vision, the people perish. And so we pray we would never have a lack of vision here in Texas, and that vision would always be rooted in your principles and precepts. We pray you would bless the meal today. We pray you bless the speakers and the conversations and the panels, accomplish its purposes for your kingdom in this community. We thank you for all the blessings you bestow on us just for being Texans, but we thank you most of all for your son. We thank you for his willingness to leave the comforts of heaven, to come down to earth, to live a sinless life, to give himself up for an excruciating death on a cross, but to be raised from the dead 3 days later, to conquer sin and death so we could have salvation with him and through him on earth and an eternal home with you in heaven. We thank you most of all for him, and it's in his matchless and holy name we pray all these things. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Kraus. Y'all enjoy breakfast. We'll resume momentarily. Well, folks, I hope you're enjoying your breakfast. We will resume the program now, and I hope that you will join me in recognizing and applauding 3 wonderful members of the Texas legislature, in addition to Representative Kraus, who've joined us from the Senate, Senator Bob Hall. And sure, applaud, Senator Hall deserves that. Representative Kyle Biederman from Fredericksburg, thank you for being here. And actually the third is Matt Kraus, but we'll applaud for you again. I'm going to introduce briefly the gentleman who will introduce our speaker. And those of you who follow TPPF research, if you're a grassroots person and come to the Capitol, you know that I'm a baseball guy, so you'll have to like the metaphor, understand it. If you are a 5-tool player, we have is Dr. Vance Ginn. Dr. Ginn earned his, Dr. Ginn earned his PhD in economics from Texas Tech. He's one of the Red Raiders on our staff. And tomorrow, his wonderful Texas Tech basketball team, 14-1, ranked number 7 with a Longhorn as a coach, will be in Austin and likely beat the Longhorns in basketball. So I'm just preempting the hassle that I will get tomorrow afternoon after that game. But all kidding aside, Dr. Ginn is a wonderful economist and a cheerful warrior, and it is a pleasure every minute of every day to work with him. That doesn't surprise you if you've gotten to know him. Dr. Ginn.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you all. It's a wonderful day. It's an extraordinary day to be a Texan and to be an American, as you all know. Just a little bit about me. I grew up in South Houston, had the opportunity to have wonderful parents. My dad, he had epilepsy, so I had a lot of seizures growing up. My mom and dad, they'd separated, they divorced when I was 5 years old, so I had this institutional change over time of growing up with a single mother. And over time, I got into a little bit of trouble in my late teen years. Any of you do that? None of you. I started playing drums. for a rock band in Houston. We were one of the top 5 rock bands in the Houston area. And, you know, we did some stupid things along the way. One of those things was going 120 miles an hour down the frontage road in Katy, Texas. And a Suburban came out in front of us. We hit the Suburban and ended up flipping 6 times. And I was life-flighted to Herman Hospital in Houston, Texas. It changed the course of my history forever. During that time, I had about a month with bruises and contusions all over and had a lot of time for prayer. And through God's grace, I was given a second chance to make a difference, to help people. What did I do? I went on to I was a first-generation college graduate, went to Texas Tech University and got a PhD in economics because I wanted to help people. Taught for a couple years at Sam Houston State University, and I'd done an internship at this little place called the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Little did I know that I would come back here and be on this stage in front of all of you great people. It's a wonderful opportunity. I love what we do here each and every day. And what we're trying to do is provide more economic opportunity and prosperity and think about the institutions that you all go through in each one of your lives. I talked about those in my life, but each of you have your own. It's not just the social, economic, and political institutions. It's how you have come about where you are this very day. And think about that. And the person who does this each and every day as well is the person that I'm introducing today and have the honor to is Grover Norquist. He is a Right on Crime signatory who helps to provide those second chances to people. He was a big part of the First Step Act that was recently passed. Woo, yes. Along with our Right on Crime team, Mark Levin, Derek Cohen, with all the great work that they're able to do. He also works a lot on tax reform, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and just overall thinking about how do we provide a more prosperous future for Texans, Americans, passing conservative Texas budgets. He's on our Conservative Texas Budget Coalition partner to limit spending, provide tax relief, property tax relief, all these great things that we know will work to make us more prosperous. So Grover Norquist is president of Americans for Tax Reform, a taxpayer advocacy group he founded in 1985 at President Reagan's request. ATR works to limit the size and cost of government and opposes higher taxes at the federal, state, and local levels, and supports tax reform that moves toward taxing consumption income one time at one rate. ATR organizes a taxpayer protection pledge, which asks all candidates for federal and state office to commit themselves in writing the American people to oppose all net tax increases. That's right. Woo. And the 115th Congress, 212 House members, and 45 senators have taken this pledge. Norquist chairs the Washington, D.C.-based Wednesday morning meetings with more than 150 elected officials, political activists, and movement leaders. The meeting started in 1993 and takes place in ATR's conference room in Washington, D.C. There are now 48 similar center-right meetings in 40 states. We have one of those right here in Texas. Every Tuesday morning we can get together and think about how can we make people more prosperous by getting government out of the way. So please help me, yes. So please help me welcome Grover Norquist.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here, and by here I mean specifically with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I mean Texas. I mean Austin, because in the next 2 years, nothing good is going to happen in Washington, D.C. that requires the House, the Senate, and the President to work together and to agree. This is a preview, but it's the next 2 years. We will continue to get judges. And that is a big deal. We have the Senate, we have the presidency. There is now a court where a majority, a slim majority of the members have read the entire Constitution. The 378, it's liberal reading the 10 amendments to the Constitution. One of the challenges we have is we will be doing judges. That will happen. Continuing deregulation will happen through the various agencies. And this has been extremely important, extremely successful. I think someday when we look back, half of the economic growth that will have come from this administration's decisions will be the tax cut, and half will be from deregulation. There is very significant deregulation that has taken place, more yet to come. And a third group, which is all the things that were about to click into being had Hillary won the election. Hillary Clinton was the other candidate. Had she, we forget in this country, some of these people go into the memory hole at some point, but Obama had regulations that, for starters, would have banned 98% of all vaping products last November. That didn't happen. It would have been impossible for people to be independent contractors. Uber and Lyft would be illegal nationally, not just in Austin. Sorry, Austin, that was stupid. The whole world's got Uber, and Austin decided they knew better. I'm in DC, we have Uber. Austin, come on. But they were going to ban independent contractor law that made things like Uber and Lyft possible. They had an executive order about to kick in, which would have made the whole idea of having franchises, if not illegal, darn near impossible. If you can imagine breaking up one of the most interesting and innovative American structural contributions to business, these things were all set in law. All Hillary would have had to do is this, and they would have happened. And Trump and his appointees went in and took this stuff out root and branch, and half of all labor law would have been rewritten by the regulators. And again, these were in place, about to happen. So they were taken out. That said, nothing good on taxes will happen, nothing good on spending will happen, nothing good on legislation will happen. There's that scene in The Wizard of Oz where they all go in and the guy's tail, he pulls the tail in so it doesn't get slammed by the door. Remember the lion? That was the criminal justice reform bill. It was the last thing to get in before the door slammed on anything reasonable. Nothing reasonable will pass. The Democrats are quite convinced that they will not allow any legislation to pass that would allow Trump and Republican congressmen and senators to stand and sign a bill for something useful. We were able to get right on crime. And backing up on why, yes. And by we, I mean you. Why Texas? Why TPPF? TPPF and Texas explain why the modern conservative movement, even for the next 2 years, maybe 4 if the Ds hold on to that House, we may lose the presidency from time to time, why we're going to win and the left will lose. And the reason is, one, our ideas work, and therefore they can be done in one state. And then the next state over goes, well, that seemed to work. And if you do something that's unique in one state, it's obvious that the success happened there, okay? So we have seen right on crime go from Texas to other states, and then eventually Washington, D.C. noticed and said, okay. We saw right to try, the legislation that said if you or a loved one has a terminal disease, and the FDA has approved a drug which might fix that, and they've decided it's safe, I mean, it won't kill you sooner than what you've got. But I'm sorry, they haven't decided, but they haven't decided it's effective yet. And that's going to take them 5 years after you're dead. So wait, and we'll spend another 5 years. It's safe, but it's not, maybe not effective, so you can't legally have it. And 41 states, Texas included, all passed a law that says, I know you have a federal law on this, we don't care. We say you can have access to those drugs. And when we had surrounded Washington, D.C. with 41 states that had passed this law, and I've been involved in every effort to try and get the FDA to be more reasonable, to speed things up, to focus on getting cures and medicines out faster for people and so on. And all the other team does is they yell thalidomide, and all of your Congress and Senate supporters all head for the hills, and nothing moves. This is 30 years now. This time, we didn't even talk to them. We just kept passing state laws, and when they were surrounded by congressmen and senators who'd all seen it was safe, right? Nobody lost an election because they voted for right to try. And the FDA just gave up and agreed that people whose lives were being destroyed by a disease could have something that might cure them. And there are painful examples where people got into the compassionate use process. One twin, he's right as rain. One wasn't allowed in and will never function fully. That's the FDA. That's what they did. And that's what you stopped when you did that. Good ideas can start in the States. Bad ideas can only be implemented in Washington, D.C. Okay? Prior to emigrating to the United States, I grew up in Massachusetts. And when Mike Dukakis, it was fine there, but I had to leave. When Mike Dukakis was running for president back in 1988, the Massachusetts legislature enacted government-run health care for everyone in the state. And Dukakis ran and said, I've done this, dun, 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 dun. As soon as he lost the election, the Massachusetts legislature, right, run by Bolger's brother, was, it's not a joke, it was, the Massachusetts legislature repealed the law because it was a stupid, destructive law that nobody could possibly live under. And it was just to make Dukakis look like he had this accomplishment. That's the law they're trying to implement nationally, okay? Because if you do it nationally and things don't work out and the growth slows a little bit, well, I don't know, maybe it was the trade winds or global warming or something, you know, who knows what it was, because the whole country suffers a little bit. You can't, you know, and it could be other things doing it. But if you do it in one, Vermont also passed one of those and got rid of it almost immediately, okay? I like the only constitutional amendment I'm actually in favor of adding is that nothing can be passed in Congress that hasn't been passed in 7 states. And I'm not sure it's an amendment or going to be an amendment, but I think it's the way the world is going to continue to work, because the good ideas that come up are coming up through the states, through groups like the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and we have a better canvas to paint on. This is the red states have Republican House and Senate, and the blue states have a Democrat House and Senate. I know we're all bipartisan here. I'm just, think conservative liberal if you want to. I won't. Now, Texas, I want to thank you for removing the asterisk recently on that redness here. You actually have a Republican House and a Republican Senate run by Republicans. That's a good step forward. Florida is also removing the asterisk they had. They have a Republican House and a Republican Senate and a Republican governor. Florida's here. But they had a Supreme Court that was completely left of center. They have a term limit, not a term limit, an age limit. When you're 70, you have to leave. Three of the most left-wing guys on the court are leaving, and that will be in a 7-person court. It will be completely filled with people who take the Constitution seriously and the law seriously and are not Democratic precinct workers, okay? So Florida, which has passed a lot of good laws, only to see them struck down by the left-wing court, the court is now, within a month, all better. And so while Texas is back in the running to do really good things with a speaker who actually wants to get all this stuff passed, you're now competing with Florida, which has taken the shackles off through the court system there. The other states that are really moving well are Arizona, North Carolina. I mean, there are a couple of states really pumping out good, innovative ideas, and as a result, these things are moving across state lines and then up to Washington, D.C. So that is why both Texas is critically important and the Texas Public Policy Foundation, because when you get it right here, it will eventually work nationally in the United States. And when the United States gets it right, eventually the rest of the world sees it. The Congresswoman from New York, Cortez, who recently came out for 70% top tax rate for individuals, 70%. And her point was, well, I read in a newspaper once that before I was born, they had one of these, okay? And the world didn't end. What she missed was we had a 70% top rate. Reagan came in, took it down to 50, and then to 28. And the whole world was watching. And the rest of the world, you may remember the Beatles song, Taxman. 19 for you, 1 for me, right? A 95% tax rate in Britain. That's why the Beatles moved to America. That's why everybody who knows how to play tennis in Sweden moved someplace else, okay? Because the woman who wrote Pippi Longstockings once was hit with 104% marginal tax rate. The idiot stayed in Sweden. But my relatives left when they ran out of potatoes or something. But I never got all weepy about the old place. I was told by my, it sucked, we left. Okay, fine. The rest of the world said 95 doesn't make sense, 70 doesn't make sense. And today, if the Democrats, and of course she's out getting all the Democrats running for president, oh, 70 is very reasonable because they don't want to not be chic, right? And avant-garde or whatever it is. So the 70 is fine. If we went to a 70% top rate, we would be the only nation in the world with a 70% personal income tax rate. Sweden doesn't have one. Denmark doesn't have one. Portugal doesn't have one. The closest you get, if you add their social security taxes as well as their income taxes up, you can get to 60% with Denmark and Portugal, okay? But nobody's at 70%. Communist China's not at 70%. None of the former Soviet colonies are at 70%. France isn't at 70%. This woman wants to go to something where everybody else has left. Hey, let's all move back to East Germany. No. It was a bad idea. East Germany was a bad idea, and the 70% tax rate was a bad idea, and people left it. So they're going back to not only failed policies, but failed policies the entire, you kind of had a referendum. The whole world, there are countries that you can't pronounce, or at least I can't pronounce, out there that don't have 70% tax rates, and they're never going to, and we're not going to put up with that. So at the state level, the ideas that you're promoting here, that you pass, that actually happen, I mean, a think tank and a state legislature and a governor that can work together as Texas does, as Arizona does, as a number of states are able to put together, really allows you to come up with an idea, but people really want to know, elected officials want to know if it works. And that's where getting it passed into legislation is so important. I was testifying on behalf of criminal justice reform, right on crime efforts in Florida a number of years ago. And as I was talking, everybody's sort of reading their iPads among the state legislators. And I said, well, Texas passed this bill 5 years ago. And then they all looked up. Texas? Okay, if we had a good idea in Vermont, I'm sorry, you couldn't sell it anywhere else. It could be a great idea, but as soon as it's from Vermont, they'd go, tell us when it reaches, anyway. You couldn't, but Texas, when you're not reforming criminal justice reform, you're executing murderers, and people have a generally good sense that you're taking this whole crime thing seriously, unlike Vermont. 5 years, you mean like 2 elections and nobody lost? This is a safe idea. It's a good idea, and it's safe. And all of a sudden, they were all ears. And so that's why actually moving it through legislation and passing an idea, and then other state legislators and then congressmen and senators go, is this safe? And I had many conversations with congressmen and senators in Washington, D.C. We had a little problem getting the senators across the finish line. And what really worked was Texas thought it up. That was a big sales pitch. And 2, nobody lost an election over it. Matter of fact, the only people who lost were Republicans in primaries who weren't with the program, who lost in primaries to people who said, we need to do this. And so we've really made this sales pitch on getting this done. Let me talk a little about what's going to happen in Washington, D.C., because it will affect everything else. We are not going to go to a 70% tax rate. We're not going to raise individual income tax rates, but that is one set of efforts that the Ds are putting forward to talk about. Why? If you have a 70% rate, as we did, we had a 90% tax rate under Eisenhower, as people keep pointing out. Taft wanted to get rid of it, but Eisenhower left it there. The 70% tax rate and 90% tax rate simply means that through the deductions and credits that are put, because nobody can survive a 70 or 90% tax rate and have the economy function, is you have credit controls. You tell investment where to go into, there's old movies you watch in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s where they talk about, I'm investing in boxcars, you go, what? Railroad cars or this side of thing, because there's a special deduction or credit for it. So through the tax code, they directed how we invest our money and how the capital in the United States gets invested. Not highest and best use, but politically. It gives political control. Yes, the economy can function. It becomes something out of Argentina, a controlled capitalism, crony capitalism, where you want help, I'll get you a tax credit, and Lyndon Johnson used to do this for a living, very successfully. It's all Texas's fault. And this is what they want. They don't want a rate they think anyone will pay. They like the idea of a rate that allows them to direct capital and control of capital in the United States. They've tried to nationalize the banks. I know we're trying to undo that, but they're closer than we'd like with the federal legislation that Obama got, but it's not everything they need. The tax code will let you do that. Second thing they want is to take the corporate rate to 21 up to 28 or 33. The fellow who's the Yarmouth Democrat, he's 71, okay? There's the 30-year-old idiot, and then there's a 71-year-old idiot. It's not a question of age here, guys. They're just idiots. The 71-year-old is the one who wants to take the corporate rate, Yarmouth. He's from Kentucky, for crying out loud. He wants to take the rate from 21, which we got it down to, corporate tax rate, up to 28. And then add the 5% average state corporate tax, and you're back up pretty close to where you were trying to get away from. And by the way, you're no longer competitive with China or Germany, or anybody in Europe, if you go back up that rate. We were at 35% top rate plus 5% for average state corporate taxes. Germany's at 25. Communist China's at 25. Okay, we're at 35. Communist China's at 25. And hey, how come we can't compete better with China? Well, because we're shooting ourselves in the foot every morning when we wake up. How about we stop stupid? That would be good. And so I believe if the president got up and said, we're never, ever, ever moving from 21, it's not a piggy bank. Somebody needs to talk to Mr. Rubio, the senator from Florida, the otherwise sane state. He said, well, we could take it a couple points up because I have the spending program I want to fund. Well, everybody views 21 to 22 to 23 as a piggy bank. But there are 7 people with ideas that would only take it up a point or 2. And there's no end to that. The first time we crossed that 21 line, that's why when George Herbert Walker Bush, Texas again, allowed the Reagan 28% to drift up to 31, 33, that was not the end of it. It was just going to keep going up. As soon as you broke the 28 and said that's not a real number, it's the location of the piggy bank, 28 to 20 to 29 to 30 to 31 to 33 to 39.5 to 43.6. That just keeps going up. And that's why we have to make that line in the sand stick. Now, the other one, of course, is the carbon dioxide tax. They don't like gasoline taxes. People tend to vote them out. People tend to lose elections over gasoline taxes. And our goal is to make the carbon dioxide tax, carbon dioxide. Carbon sounds more frightening than carbon dioxide, which is what they're worried about. We breathe it out on a regular basis, many of us. And their goal is to set up a energy tax, carbon tax. And then once they've done that, to go to the nice oil companies and say, this effective 10% excise tax, VAT on you, that's not fair. Why don't we do 5 on everybody? Their real goal is the VAT. They want to be like Europe. They want to be like Europe. I grew up, I went to to Harvard, and my compatriots at Harvard wanted us, this is not a joke, they wanted us to be East Germany and Yugoslavia. This was their goal of the future. When they talk Cuba, oh, everybody reads books in Cuba, we read it. There are more doctors in Cuba than anywhere else. The left has sort of reduced its demands. Now it's Sweden and Portugal and Denmark and France, which are less scary than the other places. But their vision of where they want to go right now is Europe. They want to turn the United States into a social democracy where it's not the top rate that moves. The difference between us and every European country is the VAT, which is the hidden sales tax on every product that you buy, every service that you get. And it raises the cost in Sweden 25%. It's about 20% everywhere. I don't think it's less than 19 in any of the countries in Europe. Started much lower than that, and then it moved up step by step. So it's about, you add, what's the US tax burden? Add the VAT from France, that's France's size of government. Add the VAT from Sweden, it's Sweden's. They're getting as much money as they can out of the corporate and individual income tax rate. They can't get any more blood out of that turnip by taking those rates up because people do other things. But the VAT allows them to increase the size of government dramatically. Who pays the VAT? The middle class. The difference between middle class in the United States and middle class in Denmark is in Denmark, your tax rate's about 35%. In the United States, it's about 14% in the middle quintile. There's not changing how they tax rich people. It's how they tax the middle class. And that's their goal, because that's where the money is, and that's where they want the cash. The Democrats actually said, you know what we ought to do? We got to get rid of this Republican rule. The Republicans put a rule in, it takes 3/5, 60% plus, to raise taxes in the House of Representatives. You want to put a bill on the floor that raises taxes, you have to get 3/5 vote. It was to make it difficult / impossible to raise taxes. Good idea. The Democrats said, oh, we're going to get rid of that. And some of them said, because they hadn't read the memo, they hadn't been in the meeting, well, but we should just only require a 3/5 vote for middle class tax cuts. They said, you stupid idiot. They got rid of it all. They opened the door to taxing everybody's tax, not just rich people's taxes. That's for show. It's like when you go into a store and they say, oh, this costs $100, but special sale, it's only $50 for you. And you keep looking at the $100. Oh, look at it. It saved 50%. Aren't I wonderful? No, that was the price. And they want the middle class to go, oh, those rich people, they're paying 70, 90%. I'm only paying 35. Used to be 14, but 30, I got a deal. It's on sale, my taxes. It's not the 70, it's 35. That's half. Aren't I lucky? No, that's what you're supposed to think. And that's the goal of, the only point of having the high tax rate is politically directing capital and convincing middle income people that somehow they've got the big discount on their taxes, because they talk about the high rate, and I don't pay 70%, and I've seen this on the Twitter feeds. Oh, I'm not going to be paying 70%, what do I care, right? When they, I don't think this one was a Texan, when they put in the federal income tax for the third time in 1913, top rate was 7%. Top rate was 7%. Bottom rate was 1%. Top rate was 7%. To hit 7%, there's no zero on 7, just 7 and 7, not 70, 7. And they discussed a constitutional amendment capping it at 7. And they said, are you kidding? They'll bring it up to 7 if you do that. Okay. Maybe that would have been a good amendment, actually, come to think of it. But 7% was the top rate. And you didn't start paying 7% until you were at about $10 million. Like Cortez's, 70%, $10 million. Rich people, right? Within a few years, the bottom rate was 10%. Today, the bottom rate is 10%, higher than what the $10 million people were paying in 1913, 1914. The opening bid for a top rate is what they would like to move everybody to as quickly as they can. But they start by bringing the middle class up halfway to 70% and move from there. Texas, the other thing that we did on the tax bill is being helpful to Texas is we limited the state and local tax deductibility. So if you have a very expensive house and a very high salary and you were foolish enough to live in Palo Alto or Boston or Hartford, Connecticut, or anywhere in New Jersey or New York, you're no longer getting subsidized by people in Texas for your high state and local taxes. You're not getting a third off, right? And they actually, you may remember this. In 1978, when oddly enough the governor of Texas was called Jerry Brown, same as the other guy. But in 1978, Jerry Brown said, don't vote for Prop 13. Don't vote for Prop 13 because it'll cut your taxes $4 billion on property taxes, you fellow Californians, but the feds will get a quarter of that because of state and local tax deductibility. So they were using the state and local tax deductibility as an argument against tax cuts back when, and they use it for tax increases and against tax cuts today. That argument's gone away. While California and New York and New Jersey get their rates down because their voters realize they're paying full freight now, between now and then, I've got that lovely list of how many people moved into each state and from each state. This is the 2016 numbers. You all know you've got people moving into Texas. Massachusetts, 14,000 plus people left that year with a combined income net of $1.4 billion. So 1.4 annual income in Massachusetts moved. Illinois, $4.7 billion in annual income moved because people move with their incomes. And then they pay sales tax in Texas and Florida. Our friends in Connecticut, $2.6 billion. New York, $8.4 billion. This is 1 year, but it's annual. So every year, that $8 billion that New York lost is still not there. It's just they add to it as more people leave as well. It helps us with redistricting when we do the whole electoral college thing. Every 10 years, we move more people into red states without income taxes and out of blue states. That's helpful. It's a slow process, but it's also sending a signal to the blue states that maybe they want to grow up and become serious. Again, this is a country that wants to be a low-tax Reagan Republican country. You see it how they vote at the state level. And this is the reds, both houses Republican, the blue, both houses Democrat. Only in Minnesota do we have a split decision on that. It's a little more split here. The yellow states are Republican legislatures, both houses, but they forgot to elect a Republican governor. So we're working on getting those back. Louisiana, when we nominate somebody with somewhat fewer girlfriends, then we get to win. It doesn't have to be a really small single-digit number, but it does have to be less than what we were going with. Some of the rest of these states can't nominate idiots. We'll get the yellows want to be red states, and the green states up here with Republican governors. Actually, Massachusetts, we always elected these crazy left-wing. Before they were left-wing, they're just crazy, corrupt Democrats in Massachusetts into the legislature. Then we'd elect a Republican to keep them from stealing quite so much. And they still do that. They still do that. And people have conversations on talk radio. Well, yeah, we can't do anything about the legislature. So they put in a Republican to try and tamp down some of the theft. You are in the center of the universe here in Austin, here at TPPF, here in a Reagan Republican state with a Reagan Republican House and a Reagan Republican Senate and a Reagan Republican governor. Because when you get something right in Texas, it transfers easily to other states. And when enough states do it, even the blue states have to join as well, because they can't keep losing jobs and people and young folks. North Dakota, before it decided to be Kuwait, used to, and of course, New York, they decided not to be Kuwait. The governor decided we're not doing fracking in upstate New York, where there is fracking to be done, okay? You can vote, nope, we're not Kuwait. We will New York, was hemorrhaging people. You know, a number of these states have been hemorrhaging young people, and they continue to do so. The policies that TPPF, that the Texas legislature and governor put forward are the policies that bring people to Texas, keep young people in Texas. They don't have to run somewhere else to go find a job, which people in Vermont and Maine have to do. You just do. Everybody grows up knowing they're leaving, okay? It's not quite East Germany, but it's up there. You know, people, what's my plan? To leave. That's my career goal. Leave is my career goal from Maine. The governor, LePage, one of the great Reagan Republican governors, but he could only win because there were 2 liberals running and he won twice in a divided field, announced the day that before he just finished his 8-year term, he announced, by the way, I'm going to Florida. They have lower taxes there. It's just, he's so cool. That said, guys, I do want to stress that every bit of effort that you can put into getting more Reagan Republicans in the legislature, the House and the Senate, to keep them on the straight and narrow, moving to do things. It's not just for Texas. This is a charitable act for the rest of the country and the world. The world is watching what Texas does, because when Texas does it and other states do it, Washington does it, and they look to the United States and they say, let's follow this path. So you are in the place more than anywhere else in the country, more than Congress, again, because they're tied up in all this stuff. They can't do anything completely innovative. Things have to be tried in states, work out the kinks, make it happen. The criminal justice reform has gotten better and better as a concept, and more expansive, not smaller, but more expansive, as it's moved state by state into Washington. But it all happened because Texas, because TPPF, because Right on Crime, because Texas. Thank you.
Grover Norquist, you never fail to disappoint. That was heartfelt, by the way. I said, you know, if I start creeping on the stage, you're going to get that headmaster glare. He said, I know. But great job. And I would be remiss, even though he will growl at me later for doing this because he's not here for the attention, thinking about Grover talking about the 1980s and the economic expansion that happened, not to recognize the architect of that, Senator Phil Gramm. Thank you, sir. You can learn a thing or two from Senator Gramm if you listen well enough. And one of the things that he's taught me as we've gotten to know each other over the last few years is to really focus on the currency of ideas. And so we have seen that happen at TPPF with our work on regulation, on taxation, on education. And one of the things we've recognized too is that you can develop these nonpartisan coalitions on things like criminal justice reform. Grover's been a signatory of that for a long time. Many of you in this audience are part of that. And as I told a smaller group last night, we have recognized at TPPF, we've identified at TPPF what we think may be one of those next big opportunities, and that is workforce development. So we wanted to take a few moments as we're closing breakfast this morning to tell the story of how we're going to launch this new effort, Right on Work. And the best way for us to tell the story is not for me to do it, not even for one of our great policy people to do it, but for you to hear from someone like you and me, who works in Texas, who's benefited from private industry taking the initiative in spite of government regulations to assist those who are looking for better skills. So it is a distinct pleasure to introduce our friend Brad Bailey from S&B Constructors, who has with him his colleague, who is the feature at the end of our breakfast. Brad.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm actually pinch hitting for our president, J.D. Slaughter. We had a workforce issue and he couldn't make it, so here I am. Let me tell you a little bit about the company that I work for. S&B Engineers and Constructors is based in Houston. We're a full-service engineering, procurement, and construction firm that operates in the oil and gas, petrochemical, and infrastructure industries. We founded in 1967. S&B has over 5,000 employees. We're currently the 8th largest private employer in the greater Houston area. And over 3,000 of those employees are skilled craftspeople, pipe fitters, welders, electricians, who play a key role in building our infrastructure projects. This skilled craft force is our company's backbone. They're so important to our operation and our growth. But not just our company, skilled craft workers across the state of Texas are so important, and which is why we need to have workforce development solutions right now. Thanks to regulatory reform and tax reform, over the last 2 years, we've had $35 billion of investment just in the greater Houston area petrochemical oil and gas industry. Let me repeat, $35 billion is on the books right now to be built in the greater Houston area in oil and gas and petrochemical. Having a skilled workforce in Texas to meet this industrial construction energy boom is becoming more and more challenging, which is why my president is not here today. Honestly, this problem is a major threat to the future of the Texas economy. To get even more specific, with the current workload that's out there and our current workload, S&B is having to hire an additional 3,000 skilled craftspeople this year just to meet our current demand of jobs that we have on the books. So, thank you. So it is a blessing, but how do we find these skilled craftspeople? We stopped teaching, shop classes in high school many, many years ago. We've seen the skilled craftsman's trade diminish. So how are we thinking outside the box to retrain and educate and find these Texans to take these jobs? Business taking the lead is imperative, and for good reason. No single entity has a greater stake at the strength of our talent pool than the business community. We have the ideas, we have the innovations, and we have the drive to change and create solutions. So let me tell you what S&B is doing to address our workforce needs. In 2005, S&B created a 17-week Earn While You Learn apprenticeship program. We call it Earn While You Learn because the workers begin getting paid the moment they take the job and step in the classroom. They're learning a new skill, but this program is different than most programs. We target local women to become welders and pipe fitters on our industrial construction projects. Why target women, you might ask, in a male-dominated industry? We find they're extremely loyal, long-term loyal to the company. They're dedicated, they're appreciative, and honestly, they pay a lot more attention to detail. The S&B apprenticeship program is a partnership between the Texas Workforce Commission and the United Way. We aggressively recruit women who are on the Texas Workforce Commission's unemployment rolls and bring them to the United Way and bring them onto the apprenticeship program. We then partner with the United Way to come in and give them valuable skills, life training skills, such as time management skills, such as financial coaching, conflict resolution skills. Teaching responsibility, accountability, and respectability to our workforce is a critically important part of our apprenticeship program. After 17 weeks of intense on-the-job training, these ladies graduate as licensed welders and pipe fitters and are guaranteed a full-time job on one of our projects. More importantly, these women go from being unemployed without limited opportunities for employment and to provide for their families to having a respectful career and earning more than $60,000 a year. Let me drive that home. They literally go home from the unemployment line to making over $60,000 in 17 weeks, and no college debt was incurred. It's pretty amazing, not just for their women, but their families, but also our local and state economies. These are very well-paying jobs. To put a point on that, recently I was talking to my congressman, Kevin Brady, and Kevin Brady was telling me that his son recently graduated from high school and went to a one-year welding school. His first year on the job, he's making more than a United States congressman. That right there shows you the demand and the need that we need for skilled craftspeople in Texas. Andy's more productive. Senator Graham said it, I didn't. To date, S&B has graduated over 125 women from our Women's in Construction Apprenticeship Program. Recently, the apprenticeship program gained the attention of the Trump administration. In September, we were honored to have Ivanka Trump come to our job site and tour our apprenticeship program. She got to meet the ladies, she got to see what we were doing, and she was so impressed, and she invited 2 of the women to come to the White House in October and talk about what we're doing. She gave her stories to the president in honoring the American Worker ceremony in the East Wing. And today we're honored to have one of those graduates here to tell her inspiring story. Let me introduce everyone to my good friend and colleague, DeWanna Grace.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you for allowing me to tell my story. So my story began when I found myself laid off twice from 2 marketing companies. I was unemployed and I was receiving unemployment checks for about 8 weeks to about a year while I was looking for work. But I started to notice a trend in which I was told if I was ever to come back to work for them, I had to go get a 4-year college degree in marketing. Well, that wasn't going to happen. I couldn't go back to school for 4 years. I just didn't have the luxury of time. I had bills to pay. I had other financial obligations. I was in really tight bind at the time. I needed a paycheck, and I needed a paycheck fast. Thankfully, I found out about the program with S&B called the Women in Construction Apprenticeship Program. It is a 17-week course in pipe fitting. It allows you to earn while you learn. I mean, how cool is that? To get paid while you learn a trade. Worked for me. Armed with the proper education, I would be offered permanent position with full benefits. After passing all my modules and completing my hands-on task, I was immediately put to work in the field in one of their project sites. After working my way up as pipe fitter helper 1, there's like 3 phases, helper 3, 2, and 1, and as you move up the phase, so does your pay increase. So after working as a pipe fitter helper 1, performing sometimes challenging pipe fitting tasks, such as grinding on different size pipes, bolt hubs, installing gaskets for hydro testing, I would have to say, it was a pretty rigorous job. And I'll be honest, it was not always easy in the field, and it's most definitely not a glamorous job. After all, I was working in all the elements. There was drizzling rain, freezing sleet, snow, and cold. Of course, there was a hot summer heat. There was critters, bugs, insects, you name it, I endured it. But I maintained and I persevered. Because you see, I had an end goal in mind. Fast forward 2 years later, not only did I receive training as a pipe fitter helper, I've since been promoted as a safety compliance officer. I'm earning a great income, and I'm able to support myself completely. So not only do I have a job, I have a rewarding career that I can be proud of. And my future looks bright with the company, and there's no looking back. So that was my story, and I'm sure there's going to be other storytelling in the future, thanks to S&B Marketing Program. Thank you.
Thank you, DeWanna. It's really inspiring. Now just imagine DeWanna's story multiplied by 125. Imagine the kids and the families that touches. It's something that's truly remarkable and changes lives, and I believe in Texas, we gotta take the lead on this. Training the skilled workforce of tomorrow, people like DeWanna, is a challenge that we can meet. But going the extra mile for the right workforce development policies so they can compete. In Texas, we have the ideas, we have the innovations, and we have the incentive to drive change and create solutions. When advocating for workforce development reform, it touches on many issues. K through 12 curriculum, school choice, community college, higher education reform, CTE programs being offered in high school, education reform, labor law reform, tax reform, and the list goes on and on. Texas Public Policy Foundation operates in these areas every day, which is why we turn to TPPF for help. S&B recently made an investment to launch the TPPF Right on Work Policy Center. With TPPF's expertise, experiences, resource, and policy wonks, they are uniquely qualified and positioned to bring this narrative to life and affect the change in Texas and on a national scale. Just look what they did with Right on Crime. At S&B, we've designed and engineered and constructed many bridges in our career. However, the Right on Work Policy Center requires us to build a bridge of a different type. This bridge connects the everyday Texan and jobs that will provide them opportunity, security, and prosperity. This bridge will connect the employers of Texas to give them the opportunity to prosper, to affect their communities, and change in Texas. We hope you will join our efforts and help TPPF launch this Right on Work Policy Center. It's critically important to the future of Texas. Thank you so much.
Brad and Dwana, thanks again for joining us, and for all of you and anyone watching on the live stream, let's go change the world. Let's get government out of the way, and let's let private people flourish. God bless you, and God bless Texas. Enjoy the morning.